I decided to surprise my wife at the annual charity dinner she organizes. At the entrance, I gave my name. The young receptionist smiled and said, "Oh, the CEO's brother, your brother-in-law, her husband, just arrived. He's over there talking to the mayor." So I decided to play along. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." I had been married to Amanda for 15 years and I thought I knew everything about her, every morning routine, every preference, every dream she shared over coffee. That confidence shattered in less than 30 seconds at the entrance of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. The annual charity gala was Amanda's pride and joy. She had been organizing it for what felt like forever, raising money for children's literacy programs. I usually attended as her supportive husband, smiling for photos and writing checks when asked. This year, I decided to surprise her by arriving early. The hotel lobby buzzed with elegant energy. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over women in evening gowns and men in black ties. I approached the reception desk, where a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair checked names against her list. "Good evening," I said, adjusting my tie. "Arthur Morrison." She scanned her list, then looked up with a bright smile. "Oh, wonderful. The CEO's brother-in-law, your brother-in-law, her husband, just arrived about 20 minutes ago. He's over there by the bar talking to the mayor." My stomach dropped. I followed her pointing finger to see a tall man with silver hair, impeccably dressed, gesturing animatedly while Mayor Richardson nodded and laughed. The man looked confident, successful, exactly the type who would know mayors personally. "I'm sorry," I said carefully, "but I think there might be some confusion." The receptionist tilted her head, checking her list again. "You are Arthur Morrison, correct? Brother to Mrs. Morrison's husband?" Mrs. Morrison. Not Mrs. Morrison Patterson, which was Amanda's actual married name, just Morrison, and CEO. Amanda had never mentioned being a CEO of anything. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Actually, could you tell me more about this CEO position?" "Oh, Morrison Industries. Your sister-in-law has done such incredible work expanding the company since she took over. We're so honored to have her hosting tonight's event." The young woman beamed with genuine admiration. Morrison Industries. I had never heard those words in my life. Instead of correcting her mistake, something made me nod, slowly. "Of course. Morrison Industries. Could you remind me which table I'm seated at?" She consulted her chart. "Table 12 with the other family members. Your brother should be there shortly." My brother. The husband she was referring to wasn't me. I thanked her and walked toward the bar, my mind racing. 15 years of marriage, and my wife had an entire identity I knew nothing about. Not just a job I wasn't aware of, but a whole persona, complete with a different last name and a company. I positioned myself near a marble pillar where I could observe without being noticed. The man the receptionist had pointed out was indeed talking to the mayor, but now I could see Amanda approaching them. She wore a stunning navy blue dress I had never seen before, and diamonds that definitely weren't from her usual jewelry collection. What struck me most was her posture. At home, Amanda carried herself with quiet confidence, but this woman moved like she owned every room she entered. Her smile was different too, sharper, more calculated. "Darling," I heard her say as she reached the two men. The word was directed at the silver-haired stranger, and she placed her hand on his arm with casual intimacy. "Darling." She called me honey when she bothered using endearments at all. The mayor turned to her with obvious respect. "Amanda, this event gets more impressive every year. The silent auction alone must have raised what? $50,000 already?" $50,000. I thought about our joint checking account, our modest savings, our careful budgeting for this kind of event. Where was this money coming from and where was it going? "We're hoping to clear $200,000 tonight," Amanda replied smoothly. "The Foundation's literacy program needs new equipment for 12 schools." Foundation? What foundation? I handled our taxes every year and we had never claimed any foundation-related deductions or income. The silver-haired man placed his hand on the small of Amanda's back. My wife is too modest. Last year's gala raised $320,000. My wife. He called her his wife. I gripped the marble pillar, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath me. This wasn't just an affair. This was an entire life that existed parallel to ours, complete with a husband, a company, and a foundation. I watched Amanda laugh at something the mayor said, and for the first time in 15 years, I realized I was looking at a stranger. The laugh was different, more musical, more performative. Everything about her was different. A waiter passed by with champagne, and I took a glass with trembling fingers. I needed to think. I needed to process what I was seeing without making any sudden moves. "Excuse me," I said quietly to the waiter. "Could you tell me who that gentleman is? The one speaking with Mrs. Morrison?" That would be Mr. James Morrison, her husband. Wonderful couple, very generous with their donations. James Morrison, her husband. I took a long sip of champagne, feeling it burn slightly as it went down. 15 years. 15 years of believing I knew the woman I shared a bed with, planned vacations with, made decisions with, and she had been living an entirely separate existence where I didn't even exist. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, though that cut deep. The worst part was realizing how completely I had been played. This wasn't a recent development. You don't become a CEO overnight. You don't develop the kind of confidence and business relationships I was witnessing without years of practice. I found myself thinking about all the times Amanda had mentioned working late at her volunteer positions, all the weekend trips for charity planning, all the new clothes she explained as gifts from grateful organizations. It had all been lies, elaborate, carefully constructed lies. I moved to a different position, still watching. James Morrison was younger than me, probably by 7 or 8 years. He had the kind of easy charm that comes with old money and older confidence. When he spoke, people listened. When he moved, Amanda followed. They looked like they belonged together in a way that made my chest ache. But what struck me most was how natural they seemed. This wasn't an affair, some desperate escape from an unhappy marriage. This was a partnership, a real relationship with depth and history, which meant my marriage was the lie. I finished my champagne and set the empty glass on a nearby table. I had a choice to make. I could walk over there, create a scene, demand explanations. I could confront Amanda in front of her mayor friend and her other husband, or I could stay in the shadows and learn exactly what I was dealing with. The smart money was on gathering information first. I pulled out my phone and discreetly took a photo of James Morrison. Then I found a quiet corner and did a quick internet search for Morrison Industries. The results made my hands shake. Morrison Industries was a mid-sized construction and development company with projects worth millions of dollars across 3 states. Amanda Morrison was listed as Chief Executive Officer, a position she had held for 8 years. 8 years. We had been married for 15, which meant she had been building this empire for more than half of our marriage. There were photos of her at ribbon cuttings, industry conferences, charity events. In every single picture, she looked like the woman I had just watched command respect from the mayor. Confident, powerful, successful. Nothing like the Amanda who came home tired from her volunteer work and complained about difficult committee members. I scrolled through more results and found their company website. There was a whole section about their charitable foundation, including photos from previous year's galas. I recognized the hotel, the setup, even some of the decorations. This event, the one I thought was organized by my wife's literacy volunteer group, was actually a corporate foundation gala for a company worth millions of dollars. A company my wife owned and operated without me knowing it existed. I looked back toward the bar where Amanda and James were still talking with the mayor. She threw her head back, laughing at something, and the motion was so familiar it made my heart clench. I had seen that same laugh countless times across our dinner table, but apparently I had only been seeing an echo of it. The receptionist's voice echoed in my head. Your brother-in-law, her husband, just arrived. Her husband. Not her first husband or her ex-husband or her business partner. Her husband. I spent the next hour moving through that gala like a ghost. Nobody knew who I was, which gave me the perfect cover to observe. I positioned myself near conversations, lingered by the silent auction tables, and watched my wife navigate her secret world with practiced ease. What I discovered made my 15-year marriage feel like a complete fiction. Amanda moved through the crowd like she had been born to this. She knew everyone's names, remembered their children's accomplishments, asked about business ventures with genuine knowledge. This wasn't someone playing a role. This was someone completely at home in a world of money and influence. I overheard her discussing zoning permits with a city councilman, debating construction timelines with contractors, and reviewing investment portfolios with financial advisors. The woman who claimed to struggle with our household budget was casually talking about seven-figure projects like they were grocery lists. The Morrison Foundation has allocated $2.7 million for infrastructure development this fiscal year, she told a group of local business owners. We're particularly focused on sustainable building practices in underserved communities. $2.7 million. I thought about how she had questioned spending $300 on a new lawnmower just last month. James Morrison stayed close to her side throughout these conversations, and their dynamic became clearer the longer I watched. He wasn't just a business partner or even just a lover. He was her intellectual equal, finishing her sentences about complex financial matters, adding details to her explanations of company policies. They had the rhythm of people who had been making decisions together for years. At one point, I positioned myself near their table during dinner. They sat at the head table naturally with other prominent couples. I found an empty seat at a nearby table where I could listen without being conspicuous. "The quarterly reports look excellent," James was saying as he cut into his salmon. "The Denver project alone will net us $4.8 million once we close next month." Amanda nodded, sipping her wine. "Good. I want to increase the foundation's education budget for next year. We're getting requests from districts in Colorado and Utah now." "How much are you thinking?" "Another $1.5 million minimum. James, we have the resources, and the impact data from the pilot programs is extraordinary. $1.5 million. Spoken like someone deciding whether to order dessert. I listened to them discuss property acquisitions, staff promotions, and partnership opportunities with other companies. Every detail revealed more about the scope of what Amanda had hidden from me. Morrison Industries wasn't some small side business. It was a regional powerhouse with dozens of employees, multiple ongoing projects, and enough money to casually donate millions to charity. During a brief moment when James excused himself to speak with someone across the room, I made my move. "Mrs. Morrison?" I approached their table, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Amanda looked up, and for just a split second I saw something flicker across her face. Not recognition exactly, but awareness, like she knew she should know me but couldn't place how. "I'm sorry," she said with a polite smile. "Have we met?" Have we met? The woman I had shared a bed with for 15 years was asking if we had met. "Arthur Morrison," I said, watching her reaction carefully. "I believe we're related through marriage." The flicker became more pronounced. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly, and she glanced quickly toward where James was talking with the group across the room. "Morrison," she repeated slowly. "I'm not sure I understand the connection." I could see her mind working, trying to figure out who I was and what I might know. The careful way she was speaking told me she was buying time, assessing the potential threat. "I'm James's brother," I said, sticking to the story the receptionist had given me. "From back east. He mentioned you had family coming tonight." Relief washed over her features so quickly that someone who hadn't been married to her for 15 years might have missed it. But I caught it along with something else. She had been genuinely afraid for a moment. "Of course," she said, her smile becoming warmer and more natural. "He mentioned you might be able to make it. I'm so glad you could be here for the gala." The ease with which she lied was breathtaking. She had recovered from her momentary panic and was now playing the role of welcoming sister-in-law with Oscar-worthy skill. "It's quite an impressive event," I said. "James tells me you've grown the company significantly since taking over." "We've been fortunate," she replied modestly. The construction industry has been good to us, and we've been able to expand our charitable giving substantially. Charitable giving. I almost laughed at the irony. She gave away millions to strangers while telling me we couldn't afford a weekend trip to visit my sister. How long have you two been married? I asked, genuinely curious about the timeline. 8 wonderful years, she said without hesitation, though it feels like we've known each other forever. 8 years. We had been married for 15, which meant she had married James Morrison 7 years into our marriage. Not only was she living a double life, she was a bigamist. That's beautiful, I managed. James is lucky to have found someone who shares his passion for business. We make a good team, she agreed. Though I think I'm the lucky one, he taught me everything I know about running a company. Another lie. I happened to know that Amanda had a business degree and had worked in corporate finance before we married. She had told me she gave up her career to focus on volunteer work and starting a family we never had despite years of trying. Now I wondered if that had been another deception. James returned to the table, and Amanda's entire demeanor shifted. Her smile became more genuine, her posture more relaxed. She was genuinely happy to see him in a way that sent a spike of jealousy through my chest. "Darling, this is your brother Arthur from back east," she said smoothly. James extended his hand with a confused smile. "My brother?" For a moment the facade cracked. Amanda's eyes went wide, and I could see her scrambling to figure out how to handle the situation. "I think there might be some confusion," James continued politely. "I don't have any brothers." The silence stretched for just a beat too long. Amanda was trapped between her lie to me and the truth James was inadvertently revealing. "Oh my goodness," I said, jumping in to save her from the hole she had dug herself into. "I think I misunderstood the seating arrangements. I was told I was seated with family, and when I saw the name Morrison—" "Ah," James said with relief. "That explains it. Common mistake with a name like Morrison. Are you with one of our partner companies?" "Something like that," I replied vaguely. "I should probably find my actual table. Thank you for the conversation, Mrs. Morrison. It was enlightening." As I walked away, I could feel Amanda's eyes following me. She knew something wasn't right, but she couldn't figure out exactly what. The fear I had seen earlier was back, and this time it stayed. I found a quiet corner and pulled out my phone again. This time I searched for marriage records. It took some digging, but eventually I found what I was looking for. Amanda Morrison and James Morrison had been married 8 years ago in a small ceremony in Denver, Colorado. The same Amanda Morrison who was currently married to me in Sacramento, California. My wife was married to 2 men simultaneously, and neither of her husbands had known about the other. Until now. I watched her from across the room for the rest of the evening. She was more subdued after our conversation, frequently glancing around like she was looking for someone, or looking out for someone. She knew her secret was no longer safe, but she didn't know how much I had figured out. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I made sure to be among the first to go. But before I left, I approached the reception desk one more time. "Excuse me," I said to the same young woman who had unknowingly revealed Amanda's secret world. "Could I get a copy of tonight's program? I'd like to keep it as a memento." "Of course," she said, handing me a glossy brochure. Inside were photos from previous year's events, a complete list of Morrison Industries' charitable contributions, and detailed information about their foundation's work. It was a comprehensive guide to the empire my wife had built while I thought she was volunteering at the local library. But most importantly, it had contact information for Morrison Industries, including their main office address. Tomorrow, I would start learning exactly how deep this deception went. As I drove home through the quiet streets, I thought about Amanda sitting at that head table, laughing with the mayor, discussing million-dollar budgets like they were household expenses. I thought about the easy intimacy between her and James, the way they moved like 2 parts of the same machine. And I thought about the woman who would come home tonight and ask me how my evening went, probably while removing those diamonds I had never seen before and hanging up that dress that cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. For 15 years, I had been married to a performance. Tonight, I had finally seen the real show. The question now was, what to do with that knowledge? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Amanda, listening to her breathe, wondering how many lies lived in the space between us. She had come home around midnight, slipping into bed quietly like she always did after these events. She smelled like expensive perfume and champagne, scents that seemed foreign in our modest bedroom. "How was your evening?" she had whispered in the dark, probably thinking I was asleep. "Fine," I had mumbled back. "Watched some television." Even that small exchange felt poisonous now. She was asking about my evening while returning from an event where she had played the role of a successful CEO married to another man. The casual cruelty of it made my chest ache. By morning, I had made a decision. I needed to know everything, and I needed to know it before I confronted her. The woman lying next to me had demonstrated an ability to lie with breathtaking skill. If I was going to have any chance of getting the truth, I needed to arm myself with facts first. Amanda left for work at her usual time, kissing me goodbye and mentioning she would be late because of a volunteer committee meeting. I waited 30 minutes after her car disappeared down our street, then I drove to the address I had found for Morrison Industries. The building was nothing like what I had expected. Instead of some small office suite, Morrison Industries occupied 4 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise. The lobby was all marble and glass, with Morrison Industries prominently displayed on the building directory alongside law firms and investment companies. I took the elevator to the 15th floor and stepped into a reception area that probably cost more than my annual salary to design. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city, and original artwork hung on walls that looked like they belonged in a museum. "Can I help you?" asked the receptionist, a professional-looking woman in her 40s. "I'm here to see Mrs. Morrison," I said. "I don't have an appointment, but I'm family." She consulted her computer screen. "I'm sorry, but Mrs. Morrison is in Denver today for the groundbreaking ceremony. She won't be back until Thursday. Would you like me to schedule something for Friday?" Denver. Amanda had told me she would be at a literacy committee meeting across town. "The groundbreaking ceremony?" I asked. "Yes, for our new community center project. It's been in the planning stages for 2 years. Very exciting." She smiled warmly. "Are you one of Mr. Morrison's relatives? He mentioned family might be stopping by." "Something like that," I said. "Could you tell me more about the company?" "I'm afraid I don't know much about what they do." Her face lit up with genuine pride. Morrison Industries has been a leader in sustainable construction for over a decade. We specialize in mixed-use developments that incorporate affordable housing, commercial space, and community resources. Mrs. Morrison took over as CEO 8 years ago and has tripled our revenue while doubling our charitable giving. Tripled their revenue. Doubled their charitable giving. While I thought my wife was struggling to organize book drives for elementary schools. "She sounds impressive," I managed. "Oh, she's remarkable. She has a vision for how construction can serve communities, not just profit margins. The Morrison Foundation has donated over $15 million in the past 5 years alone." $15 million. I did quick math in my head and realized that Amanda's secret company had donated more money than I would earn in several lifetimes. "That's incredible," I said. "And she works closely with her husband on these projects?" "Mr. and Mrs. Morrison are true partners. He handles the financial side while she focuses on community development and sustainable practices. They complement each other perfectly." They complement each other perfectly. The phrase stayed with me as I left the building and drove aimlessly through the city. In 15 years of marriage, nobody had ever described Amanda and me as complementing each other perfectly. We coexisted peacefully, but we had never been true partners in anything meaningful. I found myself in a coffee shop staring at my phone. A quick search had revealed that Amanda Morrison's groundbreaking ceremony was being covered by the Denver Business Journal. Sure enough, there were photos from that morning showing Amanda in a hard hat, smiling as she posed with a ceremonial shovel. She looked radiant. confident and purposeful in a way I hadn't seen in years. The caption identified her as the CEO of Morrison Industries and mentioned that the new community center would serve over 3,000 families. There was a quote from her about sustainable development and community investment. I scrolled through more photos and found one that made my blood run cold. Amanda and James Morrison were cutting a ribbon together, both beaming at the camera. The photo was tagged with both their names and included the phrase, "Power couple continues their commitment to affordable housing." Power couple. That's what they were. That's what they had built together. I kept digging and found more disturbing information. Morrison Industries had been James Morrison's family company, inherited from his father 10 years ago. But according to the articles I found, the company had been struggling until Amanda joined as a partner 8 years ago. 8 years ago, right when they had gotten married. The business publications painted a picture of a company transformed by Amanda's vision and expertise. She hadn't just married James Morrison, she had saved his family legacy and turned it into an empire, which meant their relationship wasn't just about love or even money. It was about mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine partnership. Everything my marriage to Amanda lacked. I drove home feeling hollowed out. The house felt smaller somehow, shabbier. The furniture that had once seemed comfortable now looked cheap. The carefully managed budget that I had thought was necessary now felt like a joke. I walked through our bedroom and noticed things I had never paid attention to before. Amanda's jewelry box contained pieces I didn't recognize. Her closet held designer clothes with tags from stores we couldn't afford. Her dresser drawer had business cards for financial advisors, real estate agents, and investment brokers. How had I missed all of this? The answer was humbling. I had missed it because I hadn't been paying attention. For years I had been so focused on our quiet, predictable life that I hadn't noticed my wife was living an entirely different existence. I found myself in Amanda's home office, a small room she used for her volunteer work, or at least that's what I had thought it was for. Looking at it with new eyes, I realized this wasn't the workspace of someone organizing bake sales and book drives. There was a high-end computer, multiple monitors, and a printer that could handle complex documents. The file cabinet was locked, but the desk drawers weren't. Inside, I found business contracts, financial statements, and correspondence with lawyers, accountants, and government officials. One folder contained property deeds for buildings I had never heard of. Another held insurance policies for assets worth millions of dollars. A third contained what appeared to be architectural plans for construction projects across 3 states. My wife wasn't just the CEO of Morrison Industries. She was a major player in regional development, with her fingerprints on projects that would shape communities for decades, and she had hidden all of it from me. I was still sitting at her desk, surrounded by evidence of her secret empire, when I heard her car in the driveway. I quickly put everything back where I had found it and went to the kitchen, trying to look normal. "How was your day?" Amanda asked as she came through the door, setting down her purse and kicking off her shoes. "Quiet," I said, studying her face. "How was your committee meeting?" She didn't even blink. "Productive. We're planning a literacy fair for next month, lots of details to work out." The ease with which she lied was still shocking. She had spent the day in Denver breaking ground on a multi-million-dollar community center, and she was telling me about a literacy fair that didn't exist. "Sounds important," I said. "It is. These kids need all the support we can give them." She opened the refrigerator and started pulling out ingredients for dinner. "What should we do about the kitchen faucet? It's been dripping for weeks." The kitchen faucet. She was asking about a $20 repair while she controlled millions of dollars through her secret company. The disconnect was so stark it felt surreal. "I'll pick up a replacement washer tomorrow," I said, playing along with the charade. "Good. I hate wasting money on a plumber for something so simple." Wasting money. The woman who had donated $15 million to charity was worried about wasting $50 on a plumber. I watched her prepare dinner, moving around our small kitchen with the same efficiency she probably used to run board meetings. Everything about her was a performance, carefully calibrated to maintain the fiction of our modest middle-class life. But as I observed her more closely, I started to notice cracks in the facade. Her manicure was too expensive for someone living on my salary alone. Her watch was a brand that cost more than our car. Even her casual clothes had subtle details that spoke of serious money. The signs had been there all along. I had just been too trusting, too comfortable, too willing to believe that the woman I loved was exactly who she appeared to be. During dinner, I found myself studying her face, looking for some sign of the guilt or conflict she must be feeling. But there was nothing. She chatted about neighborhood gossip, asked about my work, and complained about the cost of groceries with the same sincerity she had shown for years. Either she was a sociopath, or she had compartmentalized her life so completely that she could genuinely inhabit each role without any cognitive dissonance. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked suddenly. "You seem distracted." "Just thinking about work," I lied, matching her skill for deception. "Anything I can help with?" The irony was devastating. She was offering to help me with my problems while maintaining one of the most elaborate lies I had ever encountered. "No, it's nothing serious," I said. "Just the usual office politics." She nodded sympathetically and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. The gesture felt like a mockery. After dinner, I excused myself to take a walk around the neighborhood. I needed fresh air and space to think. The suburban streets that had once felt like home now felt like a movie set, artificial and temporary. I thought about the photos I had seen of Amanda at the groundbreaking ceremony. She had looked like she belonged there, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. When was the last time I had seen her look that happy at home? The truth was, I couldn't remember. As I walked, I realized that my marriage hadn't just been built on lies. It had been built on the absence of truth. We had created a life that was comfortable and predictable, but it had never been real for her. I was her cover story, not her partner. The question that haunted me as I made my way home was simple: what was I going to do about it? I made a decision that night that would have surprised the man I was 24 hours earlier. I was not going to confront Amanda immediately. The old me would have burst into our bedroom demanding explanations, tears in my eyes, voice shaking with betrayal and hurt. But the old me hadn't known he was married to someone capable of maintaining such an elaborate deception. If Amanda could live a double life for 8 years, then she was far more strategic than I had ever given her credit for. Going into a confrontation without preparation would be like bringing a knife to a gunfight. So instead, I became a student of my own marriage. I started paying attention to details I had previously ignored. Amanda's phone habits, her schedule patterns, the way she dressed for different types of events. I began to see the careful choreography of her deception. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, she left for work 30 minutes earlier than usual. Those were the days she claimed to have early volunteer meetings, but I started to suspect they were Morrison Industries board meetings or construction site visits. Her phone had 2 distinct ringtones. The standard ring was for calls she answered normally, usually from me or our neighbors or service providers. But there was a second ringtone, a softer classical melody that made her face change entirely. Those calls she either answered immediately with a completely different tone of voice, or she let them go to voicemail and returned them from another room. The classical ringtone, I realized, was for her real life. I started a notebook, documenting these patterns. It felt clinical, almost cruel, but I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with before making any moves. The 3rd week of my investigation, I decided to take a personal day from work and follow her. Amanda left the house at 7:30 on a Thursday morning, dressed in a charcoal gray suit I had never seen before. She carried a leather briefcase that looked expensive and wore jewelry that definitely hadn't come from our joint checking account. I followed her car from a safe distance, expecting her to head toward the community center where she claimed to volunteer. Instead, she drove straight to the Morrison Industries building. She had her own parking space in the underground garage, marked with A. Morrison, CEO in gold lettering. I parked across the street and watched through binoculars as she emerged from the garage and walked into the building. Even from a distance, her body language was different. She moved with authority, acknowledging the doorman with a nod that spoke of familiarity and status. I spent the entire day watching that building, taking notes on who came and went. Construction crews reported to supervisors who then went inside. Men in expensive suits arrived for meetings. A catering truck delivered what looked like lunch for a large group. Morrison Industries was clearly a thriving business with dozens of employees and constant activity. At 4:30, James Morrison arrived in a silver BMW. He parked in the space next to Amanda's, labeled J. Morrison, CFO, Chief Financial Officer. He wasn't just her husband in this other life. He was her business partner. I watched him enter the building and wondered what they talked about during their workday. Did they discuss construction schedules and profit margins with the same intimacy that Amanda and I discussed grocery lists and home repairs? At 6:15, they emerged together. James had his hand on the small of Amanda's back as they walked to their cars, the same casual gesture of ownership I had seen at the gala. They spoke briefly, James gesturing toward some papers he was holding, Amanda nodding and pointing to something on the documents. Then they kissed goodbye. Not a passionate embrace, but the comfortable kiss of a married couple ending their shared workday. I followed Amanda home, arriving several minutes after she did. When I walked through the front door, she was already changed into jeans and a casual sweater, the expensive suit nowhere to be seen. "How was your day?" she asked, starting dinner preparations. "Long," I said honestly. "How was your volunteer meeting?" "Frustrating. The school district keeps changing their requirements for the literacy program. We spent most of the day trying to figure out new compliance issues." The lie rolled off her tongue with practiced ease. She had spent the day running a construction company, not arguing with school administrators. "That sounds complicated," I said, watching her face for any sign of guilt or discomfort. "It is. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth all the hassle." She sighed dramatically. "But the kids need these programs." The kids? She was invoking children to justify a lie about work she wasn't even doing. The manipulation was sophisticated and deeply disturbing. Over dinner, I decided to test her. "You know," I said casually, "I've been thinking we should take a trip. Maybe somewhere we've never been before." Amanda looked up from her salad with interest. "That sounds nice. What did you have in mind?" "Denver, maybe. I've heard good things about the restaurants there." I watched her face carefully. Denver, where she had been just last week for the groundbreaking ceremony, where she and James probably traveled regularly for business. "Denver's nice," she said without missing a beat. "Though I hear it's expensive. Maybe we should think about somewhere closer to home." Expensive? The woman who controlled millions of dollars thought Denver was too expensive for a weekend trip. "You're probably right," I said. "I just thought it might be fun to try somewhere new." "We could always go to San Francisco," she suggested. "It's been years since we've been to the city." San Francisco, safe, familiar, somewhere she could be confident she wouldn't run into her other life. I agreed to think about San Francisco while mentally noting another data point in her pattern of careful risk management. After dinner, I excused myself to work on some projects in the garage. Really, I wanted to call the Denver Business Journal that had covered Amanda's groundbreaking ceremony. "I'm calling about the Morrison Industries story you ran last week," I told the journalist who had written the article. "I'm working on a follow-up piece about sustainable construction practices." "Oh, the community center project, that's a great story. Amanda Morrison is doing incredible work up there. Have you spoken to her directly?" "I'm trying to get some background first. How long has she been involved in Denver development?" "Well, Morrison Industries has been working in the Colorado market for about 6 years now. Amanda really pioneered their community-focused approach. She's got projects planned through 2030. 2030. Amanda had business plans extending 7 years into the future, while she told me she wasn't sure if her volunteer position would last through next month. "She seems very committed to the work," I said. "Oh, absolutely. She and her husband are up here at least once a month. They've become real fixtures in the local development community, very well respected." "At least once a month?" I thought about all the times Amanda had told me she needed to stay late for meetings or attend weekend workshops. Had she actually been flying to Denver to build her empire? I thanked the journalist and hung up, feeling sick. That weekend, I decided to conduct a more systematic search of our house. Amanda was at another volunteer event, or at least that's what she had told me. I started in her office and worked my way through every room, looking for evidence I had missed. In the back of her closet, behind clothes I rarely saw her wear, I found a small, fireproof safe. It was locked, but I knew Amanda well enough to guess at possible combinations. Our anniversary date didn't work. Her birthday didn't work. My birthday didn't work. Then I tried James Morrison's birthday, which I had found in one of the business articles about him. The safe opened. Inside were documents that made my hands shake. A marriage certificate for Amanda and James Morrison, dated 8 years ago. Insurance policies listing James as her beneficiary. Bank statements for accounts I had never known existed, showing balances that made our joint savings look like pocket change. There were also travel itineraries, hotel reservations, and conference registrations, all for Amanda Morrison and James Morrison, traveling together as a married couple to cities across the country. But the document that hit me hardest was a will, Amanda's will, dated 2 years ago, leaving everything to James Morrison. According to the legal document in my hands, I didn't exist in my wife's estate planning. I photographed everything with my phone, then carefully returned the documents to exactly how I had found them. My hands were steady, but my mind was reeling. This wasn't just an affair or even a business partnership, disguised as marriage. This was a complete parallel life with its own legal and financial structure. Amanda had created an alternate reality so thorough that she had estate planning in place for it. I sat in our living room that afternoon, surrounded by the modest furniture and family photos that represented 15 years of what I had thought was our life together. Everything felt hollow now, like a museum exhibit of a life that had never really existed. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal, though that cut deep. The worst part was realizing how little I had actually mattered. Our marriage wasn't something she had grown tired of or fallen out of love with. It was something she had never taken seriously in the first place. I was a placeholder, a cover story that allowed her to maintain some version of middle-class normalcy while she built an empire with the man she actually loved. When Amanda came home that evening, she found me reading in the living room the picture of a quiet husband enjoying a peaceful Saturday. "How was your day?" she asked, kissing my cheek. "Relaxing," I said, looking up at her with a smile. "How was the literacy workshop?" "Productive. We learned about new teaching methods for struggling readers." Another lie, delivered with the same warmth and sincerity she had shown me for years. But this time, I had evidence. This time, I knew exactly what I was dealing with, and this time, I had a plan. I wasn't going to confront Amanda until I was ready to leave. There was no point in giving her a chance to prepare counter-strategies or create new lies to explain away what I had discovered. She had played this game for 8 years, but she didn't know that I had finally learned the rules. The old Arthur would have begged for explanations, asked for another chance, tried to figure out how to compete with her other life for her attention. The new Arthur understood that this wasn't a competition he could win or even one worth entering. But before I walked away, I was going to make sure I understood exactly what I was walking away from. And I was going to make sure that when I left, it was on my terms, not hers. The next 3 weeks were the strangest of my life. I lived in my own house like a spy, gathering intelligence while maintaining the facade of being the same trusting husband I had been for 15 years. But every day brought new revelations that made Amanda's deception even more staggering. I discovered she had been using our joint tax returns to hide income from Morrison Industries. The charitable deductions we claimed each year weren't from our modest donations to local organizations. They were from massive contributions made by the Morrison Foundation. Amanda had been filing our taxes as a married couple while simultaneously filing separate returns as Amanda Morrison, CEO. This wasn't just adultery or even bigamy. This was tax fraud on a scale that could send her to federal prison. I also learned that our mortgage payments, the ones we carefully budgeted for each month, were being automatically paid from one of her hidden accounts. Our modest suburban home wasn't a financial burden we shared. It was a minor expense she covered without thinking about it, like buying coffee. The humiliation of that discovery was profound. For years I had felt proud of how we managed our finances together, how we made sacrifices to stay within our budget. But there had been no we and no real budget. I had been playing house with monopoly money while Amanda managed a real fortune elsewhere. But the most disturbing discovery came when I hired a private investigator. I know that sounds dramatic, but I had reached the limits of what I could learn on my own. I needed professional help to understand the full scope of Amanda's double life, and I needed documentation that would hold up in court. The investigator, a former police detective named Sarah Chen, was thorough and discreet. Within a week, she had uncovered details that made my amateur detective work look pathetic. Amanda and James Morrison owned 4 properties together: the corporate headquarters building, a luxury condo in Denver, a vacation home in Aspen, and a beach house in San Diego. They traveled together regularly for both business and pleasure, staying in 5-star hotels and dining at restaurants that charged more for a single meal than Amanda and I spent on groceries in a month. But what really shocked me was the timeline Sarah constructed of their relationship. Amanda and James had been together for 12 years, not 8. They had been dating for 4 years before they got married, which meant their relationship had begun just 3 years into my marriage to Amanda. Our entire marriage had been a lie from almost the beginning. Sarah also discovered that James Morrison had no idea about me. To him, Amanda was a divorced woman who had left an unhappy first marriage to build a new life with him. He wasn't complicit in the bigamy. He was another victim of Amanda's deception, just one who had gotten the better deal. This revelation forced me to reevaluate everything. Amanda wasn't just a cheating wife or even a gold digger. She was someone capable of maintaining elaborate lies with multiple people for over a decade. The level of compartmentalization required for such deception suggested a psychological sophistication that was genuinely frightening. Armed with Sarah's report, I finally felt ready to take action. But I wasn't going to confront Amanda directly. That would give her a chance to spin new lies, to manipulate the situation, to control the narrative as she had been doing for years. Instead, I was going to force her hand. I started by consulting with 3 different attorneys, getting multiple perspectives on my legal options. The consensus was clear. Amanda's bigamy invalidated our marriage, which meant I could seek an annulment rather than a divorce. An annulment would erase our marriage legally, as if it had never existed. More importantly, her tax fraud and financial deception gave me grounds to seek compensation for the years of emotional and financial harm she had caused. I wouldn't just be walking away empty-handed, I would be leaving with enough money to rebuild my life comfortably. But timing was crucial. I needed to coordinate my legal actions carefully to maximize their impact and minimize Amanda's ability to respond. The first step was protecting my own assets. I opened new bank accounts and credit cards that Amanda couldn't access, then began quietly transferring money from our joint accounts. Not enough to trigger immediate attention, but enough to ensure I wouldn't be left financially vulnerable. I also started documenting everything about our daily life together. I recorded conversations, photographed documents, and created a detailed timeline of Amanda's lies and deceptions. Every piece of evidence would be useful when this finally came to light. The hardest part was maintaining the pretense of normalcy while I prepared my exit strategy. Amanda continued to come home each evening and play the role of devoted wife, asking about my day and sharing fabricated stories about her volunteer work. The casual cruelty of it made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to respond as I always had. During this period, I began to see Amanda with completely new eyes. The woman I had loved for 15 years was revealed as a masterful actress playing a role. Every gesture, every expression, every moment of apparent intimacy was calculated to maintain her cover story. But I also started to notice cracks in her performance that I had missed before. Sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, her face would relax into an expression of boredom or mild contempt. Other times, I caught her checking her phone with an urgency that suggested her real life was calling. She was tired of maintaining the charade, but she wasn't ready to give it up. I suspected she was waiting for the right moment. to dissolve our marriage on her own terms, probably after securing her position with Morrison Industries and ensuring that James never learned about her deception. Well, I was going to save her the trouble. 3 weeks after hiring Sarah Chen, I put my plan into motion. First, I sent copies of all the evidence to James Morrison at his office, along with a detailed letter explaining the situation. I made it clear that I wasn't seeking revenge against him. He was as much a victim as I was, but that he deserved to know the truth about the woman he had married. The letter was professional and factual, focusing on the documented evidence rather than emotional appeals. I explained that Amanda had been married to both of us simultaneously, that she had been committing tax fraud for years, and that neither of us had been living with the woman we thought we knew. I sent the letter on a Thursday, knowing that James would receive it on Friday morning. Second, I filed for annulment of my marriage to Amanda, citing bigamy and fraud. The legal papers would be served to her on Friday afternoon, just hours after James received his package. Third, I arranged to have all of Amanda's belongings moved out of our house while she was at work on Friday. I hired a moving company and had everything packed and placed in a storage unit. I left her personal items carefully organized and included a note with the storage unit information and a key. By Friday evening, our house would be empty of any trace of her 15-year performance as my wife. But I saved the most important step for last. On Thursday night, I cooked dinner for Amanda one final time. I made her favorite meal, chicken parmesan with garlic bread, and opened a bottle of wine. She complimented the dinner and asked what the occasion was. "I just felt like cooking something special," I said. "It's been a good week." She smiled and raised her glass. "Here's to good weeks." We clinked glasses, and I studied her face carefully, memorizing it. By tomorrow evening, I would never have to look at it again. After dinner, we sat on the couch watching television like we had thousands of times before. Amanda curled up next to me, her head on my shoulder, playing the role of contented wife with Academy Award-worthy skill. "I love you," she said softly, the words delivered with perfect sincerity. "I know," I replied, because I finally understood that she did love me in her own way. She loved the convenience I represented, the respectability, the cover story that allowed her to maintain her double life without complications. But she had never loved me as a person, as a partner, as someone worthy of her truth. "Are you all right?" she asked, sensing something different in my response. "Just thinking about the future," I said, which was absolutely accurate. She squeezed my hand. "Whatever you're thinking about, we'll figure it out together." Together? The irony was almost funny. That night, I lay in bed next to her for the last time, listening to her breathe and wondering if she ever felt guilty about the elaborate lie our entire relationship had been built on. But as I watched her sleep peacefully, I realized that guilt required empathy, and empathy required seeing other people as real. To Amanda, I had never been quite real. I had been a useful fiction, a supporting character in the story she was telling herself about her life. Tomorrow, that story would end. And for the first time in 15 years, my real life would begin. Friday morning, I woke up before Amanda's alarm went off. I lay there in the dim light watching her sleep and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering love. Just a strange sense of completion, like finishing a book you've been reading for too long. She went through her morning routine exactly as she had for 15 years, unaware that this was the last time she would perform this particular deception. She kissed me goodbye, told me she loved me, and reminded me that she would be working late at another volunteer committee meeting. "I might not be home until 10 or 11, she said, adjusting her jacket in the hallway mirror. "That's fine," I said. "I'll probably go to bed early anyway." She smiled and kissed me again, then walked out the door and drove away to her real life. 30 minutes later, the moving company arrived. I had given them detailed instructions and a complete inventory of everything that belonged to Amanda. They worked efficiently and professionally, treating the job like any other residential move. Within 4 hours, 15 years of shared possessions had been sorted, packed, and loaded onto trucks. I kept only what was legitimately mine: books I had owned before our marriage, Gifts from my family, items with clear sentimental value that had nothing to do with Amanda. Everything else, furniture we had bought together, wedding gifts, photographs from our trips, went into the storage unit. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the house was empty except for my personal belongings. I walked through the rooms, noting how different they felt without Amanda's presence. Larger, somehow. More peaceful. At 3:15, my phone rang. James Morrison. Arthur? His voice was shaky, confused. I got your letter. I need to understand what's happening here. I imagine you do, I said calmly. Have you had a chance to review all the documentation? I've been going through it for hours. He paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. This says Amanda has been married to both of us simultaneously. That's correct. For 12 years. Yes. A long silence stretched between us. When James spoke again, his voice was hollow. She told me she was divorced when we met. She said her first husband was controlling and manipulative, that she had to escape an abusive situation. She's an exceptionally skilled liar, I said. I lived with her for 15 years and never suspected any of this. But how is this even possible? We file joint tax returns. We own property together. We have business partnerships that require legal documentation of our marriage. She's been filing separate returns with you while maintaining joint filing with me. It's complex tax fraud, but she's apparently very good at managing complex deceptions. James was quiet for so long that I thought he might have hung up. Finally, he spoke in a whisper. What kind of person does this? I've been asking myself that question for weeks, I said. I don't think we'll ever really know. What are you going to do? I filed for annulment this morning. The papers are being served to her this afternoon. Our marriage never legally existed because of the bigamy, so I'm essentially just documenting that fact. And what should I do? I felt a surprising surge of sympathy for him. James Morrison had fallen in love with a woman who was probably more authentic with him than she had ever been with me, but he had still been living with a lie. That's not my decision, I said. But you should know that the financial documents suggest she's been using Morrison Industries to launder money and hide assets. You might want to have your accountants review everything very carefully. Another long silence. I can't believe this is happening. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. You didn't deserve this any more than I did. After we hung up, I sat in my empty living room and waited. At 4:30, the process server called to confirm that Amanda had been served with the annulment papers at Morrison Industries. According to him, she had turned pale and asked to speak with her attorney immediately. At 6:45, my phone rang. Amanda. Arthur, what the hell is happening? Her voice was sharp, panicked in a way I had never heard before. I just got served with annulment papers. This is insane. Where are you? I asked calmly. I'm in my car outside the house, but there are no lights on. Where are you? I'm inside. Come in. I heard her car door slam, then her key in the lock. She burst through the front door and stopped short when she saw the empty rooms. What did you do? She whispered, looking around at the bare walls and missing furniture. I ended our marriage, I said from my position on the couch. The only piece of furniture left in the living room. Though legally there was no marriage to end since you were already married to James Morrison when you married me. Amanda stared at me for a long moment, and I watched her face cycle through expressions I had never seen before. Shock, calculation, anger, and something that might have been fear. You don't understand, she said finally. It's not what you think. What do I think, Amanda? She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in 15 years, she was speechless. I think, I continued, that you married James Morrison 8 years ago, while still married to me. I think you've been running a construction company worth millions of dollars while telling me you volunteered at the library. I think you own properties in 4 states and have bank accounts I've never heard of. I think you've been committing tax fraud on a federal level for nearly a decade. Her face went white. How did you? It doesn't matter how. What matters is that it's over. Amanda sank into the single chair I had left in the room, her designer suit wrinkled from the stress of her day. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. James knows, she asked quietly. James knows. What did you tell him? The truth, all of it. She buried her face in her hands. You've destroyed everything. No, Amanda, you destroyed everything. I just documented it. For several minutes, we sat in silence. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty room. I felt remarkably peaceful, like I had finally set down a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. What do you want? Amanda asked finally, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I want you to leave. Tonight, don't come back. This is my house, too. No, it's not. Check the deed. I've been paying the mortgage from my account for 6 months, ever since I discovered your automatic payment system. The house is mine now. She stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. You've been planning this for months. Weeks, actually. You're not the only one who can keep secrets. Amanda stood up slowly, smoothing her skirt with shaking hands. You know I could fight this. I could make things very difficult for you. You could try, I agreed, but you're facing federal tax fraud charges. James Morrison is probably consulting with divorce attorneys as we speak, and Morrison Industries is going to be under intense scrutiny once this comes out. I don't think you have the energy to fight me, too. She walked to the front door, then turned back. I never meant for it to happen this way. How did you mean for it to happen? She was quiet for a long moment. I thought I could manage both lives indefinitely. I thought you would be content with what we had. And James? James was different. He challenged me, pushed me to build something bigger. With him, I could be who I really was. And with me? Amanda looked at me with something that might have been pity. With you, I could rest. After she left, I sat in my empty house as darkness fell around me. I didn't turn on any lights, I just sat there, listening to the silence and feeling free for the first time in years. My phone buzzed with texts throughout the evening, some from Amanda begging me to reconsider, a few from her attorney wanting to discuss settlement terms, one from James Morrison, thanking me for telling him the truth and letting me know he was filing for divorce. I answered none of them. There was nothing left to discuss. 3 months later, I received a check in the mail for $800,000. It was Amanda's settlement payment, compensation for the years of fraud and deception. With that money and the sale of our house, I had enough to retire comfortably at 62. I bought a small cabin in the mountains, 2 hours from any city where Amanda Morrison might be building her empire. I spend my days reading, hiking, and learning to cook for myself. I've taken up photography and started volunteering at a local animal shelter. Last month, I saw an article in a business journal about Morrison Industries filing for bankruptcy. According to the report, the company had collapsed amid allegations of financial irregularities and tax fraud. Amanda Morrison was facing federal charges, and James Morrison was cooperating with prosecutors. I felt no satisfaction reading about their downfall, no vindication, no sense of justice served. Just a quiet gratitude that I was no longer part of that story. Sometimes in the evenings I sit on my porch and think about the 15 years I spent loving someone who never really existed. I don't regret those years. They taught me something valuable about the difference between loving someone and being loved in return. I'm 62 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm living only my own truth. No shared lies, no comfortable deceptions, no performances for anyone else's benefit. I sleep well at night, and when I wake up in the morning, I remember exactly who I am. It turns out that freedom doesn't require revenge or vindication. Sometimes it just requires the courage to walk away from a life that was never really yours to begin with. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you discover that the person you were before the lies began is still there, waiting patiently for you to remember him.